Call to order the Marin Water Board meeting of July 2nd, 2024. Terry, could we have roll call, please?
Good evening. Director Larry Russell,
Here.
Director Monty Schmidt,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Vice President Matt Sampson,
Here.
and President Ranjiv Kush.
Here. If anyone has, I'll ask if anyone has questions on today's agenda. If not, do we have a motion to adopt today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And Terry, do we have any public comments on the agenda?
Not on the agenda.
If we could have a roll call vote then, please.
Yes, Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice President Sampson,
Yes.
President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Next item is public comments on items that are not on the agenda.
Yes, we have one so far, Mr. Phil Sauter.
Good evening. We heard some strange numbers at the last regular board meeting. First was a conservation cost of $12,100 per acre foot, 5 times more than other water districts and conservation professionals find to be realistic. Staff was asked to check with other water professionals to see if we have overestimated or if they have all underestimated. Of course, we can't move forward with an actual project until we land on a realistic number. The other strange number was the conservation goal used in the analysis. The number used to calculate cost was 180 acre feet, which is equal to 180,000 gallons per day. If $12,100 cost per acre foot is accurate, it would cost us $2.2 million to save 180,000 gallons per day, which is equal to less than 1 gallon per capita per day. I didn't see the numbers used to calculate the $2.2 million in cost. I did find a salary chart for 3 levels of conservation specialists and a conservation supervisor. They run from $8,000 to $10,000 a month, and I've heard that we have a conservation staff of 7. So we're talking at least $1 million in salaries per year. I'm not sure if salaries are included in the $2.2 million or if salaries are on top of that, which would drive the cost per acre foot even higher. I don't think it's that we're spending too much money on conservation. It's foundational to our water supply program. The issue seems to be what we're getting in return for our money. If our conservation goal is really 1 gallon per capita per day, or less than 1% of our daily usage, it doesn't seem that it would take $2 million and a staff of 7 to achieve those results. Such results may not even be measurable. They could be rounding error. A couple years ago, a few of us suggested bringing in a conservation consultant to help put together an effective conservation program. Madaus was chosen, and they began by saying the district was using the right programs, but that there was more they could do. And then the presentation was over. It seems they had not been asked to help design a conservation plan with meaningful results and the budgets necessary to achieve them. So I'm going to suggest that we bring Madaus or another consultant with experience in conservation back for a redo with an expanded assignment. Help us design a conservation program, perhaps one focused on leaks and landscaping, that would deliver 4 million gallons a day in water savings, or 21 gallons per capita per day. We've done it indoors, and I think now it's time to do it outdoors. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, Mr. Ed Jamison.
It's time to quit wasting money on consultants to restudy the same things we've studied over and over again. Madaus did an excellent job of reviewing our conservation programs. They concluded that about 3 of them accomplished virtually nothing. Rain barrels, laundry to landscape, and I think the other one was pool covers, although those seem to be a reasonable cost program. The issues have been studied, they've been defined, reliably costed out, and we need to quit spending money restudying this stuff. Too much time has gone on doing nothing. That was 2 years ago. We need to get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, thank you for the comments. We'll move on then to announcements. I think today I'd like to start with general manager's announcements because I think Darren actually has an update that's pretty relevant, at least for me and my questions.
Under GM comments, there's 2 items tonight. President Kush, the first I'll cover, and then I'll hand over to Darren for the second item. The first one I wanted to share with the board that today staff in ESA, who's our environmental consultant, met with Friends of Corte Madera Creek and MCL, Marin Conservation League. Staff at the meeting provided a detailed summary of the water balance model that was developed and the operational conditions that are proposed to protect downstream fisheries resources. Staff also heard quite a number of comments and an active discussion relating to the current conditions in Ross Creek downstream of Phoenix Lake, operational considerations, and interest in seeing the district commit to some future studies and stewardship actions. So our plan over the next week, staff will be evaluating how the district could advance our understanding of in-stream habitat conditions and potential benefits that could be realized through some collaborative stewardship actions. From this meeting, we have a clear understanding of the stakeholders' interests and ways the district can engage collaboratively. And also importantly, staff also discussed ways the district can continue to improve upon the public process for future water supply initiatives and infrastructure projects in terms of engaging with key stakeholders. Overall, we think the meeting was relatively positive and a good step. A lot of input gathered that can advance the multi-benefit interests of the district and the community going forward. So that's the first update, and then I'll turn it over to Darren for
Thank you. Good evening, directors. Darren Machado, Operations Director. As you are aware, there was a construction accident on May 24th that left our Fairfax Manor First Lift Pump Station inaccessible and inoperable. Staff mobilized quickly to implement a plan which consisted of setting up temporary pumping operations. We did identify a location that was pretty well suited for this. The only thing we needed to do was install a fire hydrant on the low system, and then we could pump from the low system to the high system. However, we had just received we own a portable diesel powered pump that we just received back from our vendor. It was out being repowered to meet compliance requirements. So it wasn't ready for operation just yet. So we reached out to Contra Costa and they loaned us a pump that would work for this application. They actually delivered it to us on a Saturday, and we set up temporary pumping operations after the hydrant was installed using Contra Costa's pump, which we've been using, and everything. The system's been operating fine. We did last week take our district-owned pump and put it into service and pull Contra Costa's out. We provided staff some training because as of right now, we're operating it 6 days a week. And this week it'll be 7 just due to the weather and the demand on the system. So that was early last week that we deployed our pump and that's been working fine. We did receive a complaint last Friday from a resident who lives in the area regarding noise and diesel emissions. And that being said, our diesel pump, I just want to go back to that real quick. We just got it back from being repowered. So it does meet the highest emission standards out there as of right now. And we do have a temporary operating permit through Bay Area Air Quality Management District to operate it. So anyways, to address the noise, we installed a fence on Friday. We had a company come and install a fence around the pump. And our crews went out yesterday to install 3-inch thick soundproofing material with inside the fencing, which has helped quite a bit. It's still a pump. You can still hear it. So as far as next steps go, so as of right now, that's kind of where we're going to leave it for the next several weeks. We are looking at a plan moving forward to purchase a storage container, about a 10x8 storage container, where we would install a 20 horsepower pump within the container and control equipment so we could automate it and run it from the corporation yard control center. As of right now, the pump, when we operate it, it's a manual operation, so it has to be staffed when it's running. So in order to set up kind of this next part of it, it's still going to be a temporary setup, but less temporary than where we're at now. So what it's going to consist of is purchasing a 10x8 storage container. We'll install the pump inside the container, do a lot of it, set it up in the corp yard. As far as site work, we need to pour a pad level out the area, bring in some base rock, and we'll have a asphalt pad that we'll set the container on. And then as far as powering it, we'll use a district-owned generator that also it's rated at the highest tier for emission standards. We're going to power it, and we did some initial testing this afternoon with that generator, and it should bring down the noise levels, the decibels. We had a decibel meter out there. It should bring it down quite a bit. It is still diesel powered, but then also we will be able to set it up to run it through our SCADA system in the control room, so it'll be automated.
If I could just add a couple items. Thank you, Darren.
Yeah.
Wanted to share with the board that we are tracking. We have a job number, all our costs, including staff time, for this temporary mobilization and all the supplies, including labor, to pursue reimbursement at some point. And also I wanted to share that we got some good news indications from the city of Fairfax, because we hadn't really heard this so far, that they are planning to move forward, bring to the council a design to get the slide repaired and the road back in good condition, and have that done by the end of October. So we will be prepared, certainly following that, to immediately we'll have our design ready to go for a refurbished pump station, and get that going fairly quick order following the repair to the road and slide.
Refurbished might be a bit of an understatement.
The what?
Refurbished might be a bit of an understatement.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it will definitely be a new pump
Start from
station, a
scratch.
new structure. Much of the equipment will be new. I mean, you saw the photo, it was quite damaged. So yeah, we'll have a sizable claim against a responsible party once they figure that out. And Molly and Jared will be busy for a while in that, I suppose.
Have you considered putting an extension on the exhaust? You know, if you got the exhaust 10 feet up, I think probably your complaints would go away.
We are pursuing that. We're not sure if we can modify the exhaust system at all.
I don't think you need to
Smart.
modify it. I think you just need to set a pipe over it.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
that's something we could definitely consider.
yeah,
Yeah.
just like if it's like 2-inch or 3-inch,
Yeah.
put a 4-inch or 6-inch.
Yeah.
And it's pretty effective. You get 10 feet off the ground, the amount of dispersion and the ability to smell it go down a lot.
Right now, our soundproofing panels go up 8 feet. So it is enclosed 8 feet all the way around, but yeah, we can
Yeah,
definitely.
but that probably still keeping it
Yeah.
in there. You know, you need
Yeah.
the wind. You need to get up into the wind,
Yeah,
you know, so that it will carry.
Mm.
And it's just a thought.
yeah, thank you.
Just really quickly, I do want to remind the board rather that this is just the general manager's update. So if you're interested in this item coming back for more information, more extended discussion, staff can definitely do that. So.
And we will be doing that for sure.
I did have some pictures. Can you just real
Those
quick?
two,
Yeah.
okay.
Just to give you a better idea of. Yeah, the picture on the left is the pump house. You can see the significant damage. The structure itself is shifted off the foundation. And as of right now, the condition of the electrical and controls equipment is unknown. And then on the right is our temporary pumping setup.
I like
Right.
the 2 fire hydrants.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
thank you.
Great. Thanks, Darren. Ben, also for the encouraging update on the stakeholder meeting regarding the Phoenix or the Ross Creek questions. I'll open it now up to director's announcements. Matt, start with you.
No announcements no announcements this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Larry?
Nope.
Monty?
No broad announcements. I just want to let folks know that I'll be for agenda item 9. I'll be recusing myself as I've done in the past because it's related to Russian River projects, and so I'll be stepping aside at that point and just rejoining for item 10.
Got it, Monty. Thank you. Jed?
Yeah, great. We had a Finance and Administration Committee meeting on Thursday, June 27th. Staff reported on proposed changes to the watershed regulations, fees, and fines. The committee referred the item to the board to consider for approval at a future meeting with adjustments that were discussed. Staff also provided a monthly financial update as well as an overview of the district's mid-cycle budget. The public may access the video recording and the documents from the June 27th FAC meeting on the district's website. Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Do we have any other board committee reports? Okay, Matt, please.
Yep, I'll go ahead and looking at board committee reports. Thank you. So on the 20th of June, we had a watershed committee meeting, our second quarterly meeting of the year, where we heard staff's recommendation to move forward with 2 referrals to the full board for additional work on the watershed, specifically around vegetation removal as we support our BIFIT plan. And it's very exciting to see that continue to move forward. So look forward to seeing that in front of a full board. We also got a presentation from the fire chief of Moraga Rinda about a new pathway of looking forward at fire suppression activities, specifically around wildfire and fuel reduction at scale and what that meant or to any open area, specifically around the WUI or the wildland urban interface area. But what was interesting, I think, for me on that presentation was when we broke down the actual responsibility for reducing wildfire threat based on science, when we're looking at components, that the open space, this is irrespective of our current issues on the watershed or interest in the watershed, but in terms of being a good neighbor and protecting homes, we only are looking at 20% of the responsibility, meaning that majority of it falls on the community, the built environment, and the homeowner. So it feels good to be knowing that we're doing our work and we're contributing to being part of being good neighbors in a countywide plan. And hopefully we can see staff continue to engage or continue to review these types of new practices and to see if they're applicable for our watershed. Because I think once we look at being a good neighbor, the next thing is really to protect our own lands as well, especially when we're seeing all the devastation coming out of these watersheds post-fire. And then lastly, we got an update on our watershed recreation management plan. And it was actually full of a lot of good items that we could potentially move forward on the watershed with, but it focused, hyper-focused on two pilots that are moving forward. That's Class 1 e-bike access, where current bikes are allowed on the watershed, and then a trail sharing pilot program from which our staff's working on finalizing trails that would be open to, as a pilot, being open to bikes that were currently not allowed on the watershed on those trails. So look forward to a further update sometime in August, September around that, and then see where it goes from there. And that's the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any other committee reports at this time? Okay, then we'll move on to our consent calendar, and it includes 6 items. For today, I'm going to go through them quickly. First is approval of the minutes from our last board meeting on June 18th. Second is approval of renewals of our annual insurance policies for fiscal year 2024-25 for a total cost of $1,820,172. In total, our insurance costs are increasing by 11%. Number 3 is approval of amendments to 2 of our contracts for our biodiversity, fire, and fuels integrated plan, or BIFIP. The amendments will increase our contract with Forrester and Kroger for fuel break maintenance and invasive management by $1,008,316 to cover fiscal year 2025 costs, and our contract with Bay Area Tree Services for forestry services by $1,054,671 to cover fiscal year 2025 costs. Item 4 is authorization for our general manager to execute a professional services agreement with Black & Veatch for the spillway modifications alternative selection and design project. The contract amount is $1,944,669 with a staff requested contingency of $300,000. Number 5 is to adopt a resolution approving the updated pay schedule effective July 1st, 2024 for district employees to reflect the CPI increase in cost of living adjustments that were approved by the board in November 2023. Finally, number 6 is to authorize the general manager to finalize and execute an amendment to the district's contract with the California Water Efficiency Partnership to increase funding for the Flume subsidy program by an amount not to exceed $44,472, which will add an additional 300 Flume devices to the program. So quite a few items there. Terry, do we have any public comments on the consent calendar?
Yes, we do. Mr. Larry Minikis.
Yes, good evening. I had asked late last week in writing for an item on the consent calendar to be moved to the regular calendar, which I'm withdrawing at this point. It was item 8B, which has to do with insurance, and just pointing out what Ranjit had said, that our rates are going up considerably higher than the cost of inflation, and that property and liability are going up 11 and 14% respectively, and privacy insurance is going up 22%. And the reason it's important for this, even though this is presented fully in the Finance Committee meeting, the reason to bring this forward in a meeting like this is for people to understand that it isn't always management's choice as to where money goes. Costs are going up, and costs have always gone up in the district much more quickly than the CPI. And we've seen that for years, and this is just one more example of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thanks a lot, Larry. Important reminder. Then if we have no other public comments, do we have a motion to approve our consent calendar?
Ranjit, can I make two quick comments?
Yes, of course.
There was an operations committee meeting on Friday, the 21st, which I think is probably worthy of reporting out on. I'm happy to do so.
Yeah. Larry, do you have any updates from that?
Well,
meeting?
I'm looking. It's not cooperating here. Go ahead, Jed.
Okay. Yeah, we had an operations committee meeting on June 27th of the special meeting of the board of directors, which I think was pretty significant. In addition to just adopting the agenda and approving the minutes, we went through what I think would be a pretty significant move for this district to increase our water supply, looking at using spillway gates enhancement in our reservoirs to create additional supply of community and our customers. That work is moving forward, it looks like, and there has been a service agreement award to the B for modification report. So that is being reviewed here. So that's one thing, and I don't know if anyone has else they want to say about that meeting, if that's okay and appropriate, Jared.
Yeah, that's appropriate if someone would like to do that. Director Smith, your
My only
video
other, yep.
freezing, so you may want to drop it so we can hear you.
Drop the video.
Yeah.
Okay. Hear that? My report.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly now.
Okay, great. My only other report is on the agenda items that is that the insurance approval and assessment, I think, highlighted what I would like to see is more focus on our risk management, not just on the insurance industry as a whole, but I really would like to see them come back and help us understand how we can do better to reduce our.
Jed, you dropped it out on the last sentence there, but I believe your note was that we do additional work with our insurance brokers to understand how we can reduce our risks.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, got it, Jed. Thanks. Okay, then with that, I'll ask if we have a motion to approve our consent calendar.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice President Sampson,
Yes.
President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We'll move on to item 9A then, our regular agenda. The first item is water supply and roadmap update. Welcome, Paul and Alicia.
Okay, with this, Ranjiv, I will be stepping aside and I'll look for a text message when to rejoin for item 10. Thank you.
Thanks, Monty.
Okay, good evening, Paul Cellier, Water Resources Director, joined by Lucy Croy, our Water Quality.
Sorry, Lucy, I misspoke.
Yes, we're here with a sort of a joint presentation on water supply and the roadmap update this evening. So with that, Lucy will take us through water supply and then hand over and we'll go through the roadmap. Yeah, that one's not working.
Must have turned it off. Okay. Okay, sorry. More technical. Good evening, Board of Directors. So tonight we'll start off with an update on water supply conditions, where we're at going into the hotter summer months. Look at water use trends that we're seeing at this point in the summer, and then look ahead at the forecast for projections through the beginning of next spring. And then I'll hand it back over to Paul to update on our water supply roadmap, the project, and review the schedule. So starting first with water supply, it may seem like a far distant time when we were receiving rainfall as we enter this heat wave, but we did actually receive quite a bit of rain this past year. We through the end of June, and since last October, we've received 62 inches of rain, which is far above average, so about 120% of average, which is great considering that the year before we also were well above average. Taken back to back, these rainfall years have impacted our reservoir storage, keeping it very high. So currently going into peak summer months, we're sitting at about 75,000 acre feet, where the purple line just shown in the middle of the screen. And so this is quite high for this time of year. And we do see a trend starting to go downwards as we enter the summer months. It's been a bit hotter and drier this summer compared to last year. It was a bit more temperate. And so we've seen that impact our reservoir storage just a tiny bit, but overall, storage sits at a very high level for this time of year and considering past years as well. Our partners to the north are also in a good supply situation as well. Both Lake Sonoma and Lake Mendocino are above average. Water supply for Lake Sonoma is 104%, as shown here. It's the black line showing that it's above the normal water supply pool, which is 124% of average. And Lake Mendocino, not shown on the chart here, but is sitting at 86% of water supply storage. So all in all, both our local and imported supply are sitting in a great point going into this peak summer months. Given the hotter months that we're starting to enter, we're seeing that demand is staying relatively low, that conservation levels are staying high. Our June production for just this past month was basically flat from the year before and still about 24% below the levels that we saw before the drought, so 2020 levels. So it's great to see that conservation is still in action. And looking ahead through March, April of next year, we are sitting in a very good position given the wet winters that we've had and the conservation levels that we're seeing from our customers. So shown on the chart are a couple scenarios, the green line showing that if we continue to have the lower demand that we're seeing currently, that we'll return to spilling next winter. If with that lower demand, we were to see very, very little runoff, more of a scenario, say 1 in 10, 2 in 10 years, we typically see, which is a 50% runoff. We would drop down to this around 70,000 acre feet, which could trigger our, we'd have a discussion with the board about triggering our first stage of the water shortage contingency plan. And then the solid orange line is another scenario in which we were to, say, return to that high demand that we saw before the drought, and also have this worst case scenario of a very low runoff year. So this orange line being a very unlikely possibility, but good to show the bracket of where we would end up. So All in all, we expect to somewhat stay between the blue and green lines, given the storage that we have at these peak months right now in July.
Lucy, quick question.
Yeah.
On the right side of that last graph,
Yes.
I think the end line is, what month is that? Is that like September?
Yeah, the chart ends in June of 2025.
And probably the key date would be October, right? Right, because that's when it doesn't rain for another bunch of months after that. So I would imagine we want to see this graph extend to the right.
April.
The months that we've targeted to taking a look at our water supply and decisions for the upcoming year are April 1st. At this point, at that point, we know how much rainfall we've received. We have an idea of what's forecasted for the next few months. If we need to put into action conservation levels over the summer months when we typically see the highest demand from customers. So April is usually the date that we target for really assessing water supply.
And Lucy, just to confirm, April is the date that is currently in our drought contingency plans.
Yes, and that is actually where the red markers are shown on the chart. So that's marking April 1st. There's a jump between the lines, but the markers are shown on April.
Right. And just to add, but I think you captured it. The reason we look at April is the assumption is no precipitation between that period and really essentially October. So we're able, once we're in April, to project roughly the next 5-6 months ahead.
Plus the water year starts on October 1st.
Correct.
Correct. So in summary, reservoir storage is remaining above average, given the consecutive wet winters we've had. And we continue to see that conservation levels are high and considerably below the pre-drought levels of 2020. So good news. And I'll hand it off now to Paul to give an update on.
Well, maybe we'll check if there are any other board member comments or discussion points.
Okay, yeah, I think Director Smith may have just been suggesting.
I think my point was yeah, my point was a little bit more like, how much water do we have, right? At the end of April, I guess, if it doesn't rain the next winter, right? What is our water supply storage? How long will it last? And how long do we have to fix the problem?
Right. So we could.
I understand the April.
We could certainly extend the chart out, a few more months there and give you a better view of what the different futures might look like with those same assumptions.
Stated differently, as I recall, it's 40,000 acre feet is the critical one on April 1st. That's the one that throws into account everything, conservation and.
That's the old marker. We've reset that because we never hit it. We've never been really, I think maybe once at 40,000 acre feet, April 1st. So when we were going through the contingency plan, we came up with a new set of targets. And as hard as it is to believe, we rarely even hit 70,000 acre feet on April 1st. And so that's kind of where we ended up with the first trigger at 10% voluntary.
So answering Jed's question, at that point, you've got about 2.5 years or 2 years of
Correct.
storage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the roadmap and just the heat wave that we're experiencing, it seemed appropriate just to remind ourselves how we kind of got here, and casting our minds back to October in 2021, as we were contemplating the emergency intertie, which is the only project available to us to bring water to the district's customers. Our reservoirs were sitting at less than 33% in total storage. So when you drove past Nicasio, there was a few hundred yards before you could see any water and lots of cracked, parched earth. Dramatic for us, really was. And you can see from this chart where that red dot is, we kind of hit that low point in October. And then the rains arrived. And the first set of rains that you can see there were almost 100-year type rains that then got followed on. So we doubled storage in the space of a month that October and November. And then after that, you can see we were spilling in January of the following year. It was pretty dramatic turnaround. It allowed us to take time out and understand, what our other options were, other than the emergency intertie.
Do you think those are actually roughly equal storms? And the first one is cut down by the fact the soil took a fair chunk of the water?
I think you're probably right on there. Yeah. I think the level of runoff.
They look similar.
Right. But pretty dramatic. And our watershed is no stranger to these types of storms over the years. I wouldn't say they're hugely frequent, but we do get some very, very intense periods of rainfall. And it'll be interesting to see what the Black and Veatch team come up when they start looking at, as they start to calculate, their maximum floods and things like that. They'll look at rainfall intensity, and that'll be an interesting discussion. But anyway, as we moved into 2022, we took that time to study and develop the strategic water supply assessment. And by February of 2023, the board had selected the roadmap. If we move to the next one, the roadmap comprised these short-term and long-term projects. And here's sort of a collection of the short-term projects, and noting that water efficiency is kind of unique among these, that it's an ongoing, so it's both short-term and long-term. Water efficiency runs throughout the entire planning period for us. But all of these projects are kind of in motion at the moment. From the Suluhuli electrification and connection to Nicasio, that's in preliminary design, and the team's engaged in meeting with stakeholders and designers. That project is moving. The Phoenix to Bontempi connection, the board's heard an update from the general manager today on that project. That project's moving. The stream release automation is in testing on Lagunitas Creek, and we're moving forward with placement of the stream gauge in Walker Creek to help us with the Suluhuli releases. And of course, the Nicasio spillway modification project. So all of this collection of projects is moving forward over the next 6 to 24 months, and they're going to result in a significant chunk of water for us, which is that's our goal. From that really dry, low period, we're trying to add dry year water supply. And it looks like these projects, depending on the given year and yield, will provide somewhere between 3,700 acre feet, 6,000 acre feet of water. We are obviously looking at longer term projects as well. And this sort of short list of projects that we have going are recycled water desalination, local storage enlargement, and conveyance of winter water. Now, our focus primarily has been on local storage and conveyance of winter water, but we have been looking at recycled water and keeping our eye out for grants, as we know that's going to be key for any recycled water projects for us. And in terms of desalination, we continue to look at different ways to pursue that and understand the technology there. So our focus then has been on conveyance of winter water to storage. And we started off with these 13 different projects, sort of 4 core areas and 13 alternatives. And those have been narrowed down to 3. And the team continues to sort of refine those alternatives, optimizing alignments, looking at what the right sizing for those facilities would be, because each of the projects has slightly different capacities and costs. On the whole, though, the project could be complete. This project, were a preferred alternative to be selected, could be completed in the range of 4 to 5 years and provide something around 5,000 acre feet per year of dry year water yield. Just reminding us what these alternatives are. So the PETA 3 alternative, as it's coded in the reports, can provide about 10 million gallons of water in its first inception. This is maximums. And this project is highly feasible. So the first leg would, in concept, connect to the end of the North Marin distribution system and move water out to Suluhuli Reservoir from there. And should the need arise, we can build additional phases of this project, connecting all the way back to the North Marin Aqueduct, and even later upsizing the Castania Pump Station to provide additional flow. So it has this benefit of sort of maybe the lowest entry point cost for a big pipeline project, but it's highly feasible and adaptable over time.
Okay, excuse me, can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
When it says no additional improvements, can you help me understand what that means again?
So the no additional improvements means that you're not building any big upstream pipelines. So there's no south transmission line. You wouldn't necessarily in the first phase need to add anything at Castania Pump Station. That would only be required at the 14 MGD level.
Great, thank you.
You're pushing harder, more oomph.
Yeah.
Through the same pipeline.
Yeah. And as we go along and we discuss with North Marin, we're finding out little tidbits of, there's a short section of pipe here that maybe we can add to the project. It doesn't add too much significant cost, but it may have a benefit to us in terms of additional flow, as they're somewhat sensitive to velocities in that North Marin Aqueduct. And we're working with them on those types of things as well. So then the PETA 4 just takes, we take off the aqueduct slightly higher up. So there's a greater capacity, and you see that first phase is 13 million gallons a day. And I know it's probably frustrating to some folks that at this point, we still haven't said that these are sort of acre feet per year projects. Part of the reason for this is that we're assessing with Sonoma what's the availability of this water. So winter goes from October to May. Are we going to get all 8 months of pumping at 13 MGD? That's a lot of acre feet. Versus we can only pump when the water is in the Russian River above the minimum in-stream flows. Is that only 3 months in a dry winter? So there'll be some kind of a range, and we're working to try to understand what the right sort of assessment for that is. So that's why we're right now talking about these projects in daily capacities, but we will be moving that to sort of per acre feet per year.
Well, just on that point, you noted that, the potential benefits are about 5,000 acre feet per year. That's in the absence of any increased storage, I think.
Yes, so these projects, the conveyance project is sort of independent utility with storage. There may be some synergies with storage for sure, but in a dry year, our storage will by definition be low. So we'll have room to accommodate this. Where increased storage plus conveyance may have a synergy is that you're less likely now to spill that imported water that you've just put into storage because you've got an even greater freeboard in the reservoir. So there are things like that we'll be able to model and sort of show you if there are any situations where we might ever regret, doing one project and not the other, or perhaps regret doing both the projects, if we were to do that as well. So those model results will be important.
Put in is one term, the other part is paid for.
Yeah, for sure. So Petaluma 4, it's a bit longer of a first phase, that red line that's come off the aqueduct there. But there are some additional phases if we were to try to seek to get to the 26 MGD capacity. And this is essentially what we refer to as the South Transmission System. It essentially bypasses Petaluma from the Cotati tanks. And then subsequent phase would be pipeline over to Nicasio for the very reasons we were just talking about. If we didn't build an enlarged storage and only went with conveyance, we would be able to put some water in Nicasio and some water in Suluhuli and maybe reduce the likelihood of spilling that supplemental water. And then the third option is the Cotati 3 alternative. And this option is really, it's sort of a build to suit because it's all new infrastructure. That's the good news. The bad news is it's a lot of pipe. And the bigger you build it, the more money the pipe's going to cost you, the more the pumping will cost as well. And so pumping will likely be a challenge in this project because we know that power is difficult to come by out in remote areas of West Marin. And we're going to need a couple of pump stations to move this water down to Suluhuli.
Oh, we're not seeing phase one on.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There, that's the phase one for Cotati, and it's less feasible maybe than the other two because you basically got to build it all in the first shot. There are subsequent phases we would could build a pipeline on to Nicasio as well. But as we look at this project and in concept, this was following all the public rights of way. But there are, the key activities that the team is working on right now. Some of them are, they continue to, I think they've been out 2 or 3 times now to drive some of these alignments, just trying to get some insights into things like, paving costs are a significant part of pipeline projects, as we know from our own work in our distribution system. And the same will be true here. But if there is room along an alignment to fit a pipeline in a verge, then maybe you don't need to do, paving. But there are other complications with verges, and so driving these and taking a look at them firsthand for the design team is important. We did ask them to take a look at a more direct route from Cotati. So that's sort of, we followed roads. We were saying, well, let's think about if we went through fields, what would that look like? And would that save us any money? And of course, additional hydraulic analysis and sizing of the pumps, and even identifying different locations for where pump stations could be, because you may not always encounter a friendly seller of a plot of land that you want to put a pump station on. So having 2 or 3 options for us to look at for pump stations is important. And then, of course, understanding PG&E's infrastructure capabilities. They're not the easiest organization to work with. I mean, they're not bad. It's just, it's a little bit challenging to get information quickly. So we're working to understand if, for example, is it a fatal flaw, this Cotati cross-country route that we're looking at? That's going to be important for us to do. And of course, environmental review of the different routes of historic and cultural biological resources. And then not least of which, what we do every day here when we put pipes in the ground is we do a USA locate. So we need to know, are there fiber optic, are there other gas lines, electric lines, other utilities in the way? How congested is it? What side of the road do we need to be on? So a lot of details. And so just to give you an idea, and I apologize, this is not the best graphic, but this is and I'll explain in a moment, if I could get the mouse to work. So the yellow line here is the original in the public right-of-way route for the Cotati pipeline. And these red boundaries are parcels of fields. And if we were to reroute the pipe following the green dashed line through these fields, there is a potential for us to sort of shorten the distance there. And of course, distance in pipeline projects means cost, right? So but it's not as much as you might think. It's only a couple, 3 miles that we get to shorten. And while that's not insignificant, it's still 10 million in the range, $10 million, right? $3 million a mile for pipe. So it's a nice cost savings, but there's going to be a lot of easements for us to negotiate. And as you start to leave the public right of way, where the soil's already been excavated and disturbed, there are additional chances that you run into some of those environmental, cultural, biologic resources that you need to adapt the project to. So still a fair bit of work for us to do in terms of evaluating the cross-country route, but we'll make sure we pencil that out. Okay, moving on to the local storage alternatives. You remember we had 11 different reservoir projects, and we didn't want to forget about dredging, so we've added that in. It's really the 12th man, if you like. I think most of us understand that dredging is a very expensive option. And I think when the team tried to cost evaluate it, the numbers that they came out with were embarrassingly high even for them, and they left it at just $1 billion plus. But it was much larger than that.
Well, could you just say, I mean, what would be the yield? I mean,
well, they were looking for the 20,000 acre foot,
okay.
the same as all the other options. But it was in excess of $1 billion by quite a bit. So really those 11 storage options, not counting dredging, have been reduced down to 3. The Kent Reservoir expansion, Sulhuli, and Upper Nicasio, which is that sort of northwest corner of Nicasio Reservoir. And the team's continuing to...
Sorry, Paul, just we do get a lot of questions about this on dredging. So, someone will, I'm sure, ask after the meeting, well, what if you just go for a few thousand acre feet to, maybe reduce the other storage, enhancements. Is there any viability around that?
I would say no. Dredging is a very, very challenging operation for a reservoir situation like ours. It's going to take multi years to get a significant volume of dredging material out of the reservoir. You've got to dry it, and then you've got to move it. So there's a sort of a whole mining operation that needs to get set up for this to happen. And that's possible. But then we've got to come up with ways of managing the downstream water quality, because as I'm sure we all remember as kids digging around in puddles, it gets really muddy, and Nicasio is going to be no exception there. I think there are really significant challenges in terms of dredging beyond the cost. But the cost, even for 1,000 acre feet of water supply in a lake like Nicasio, would have cost per acre foot over $100,000.
Thank you. And I'm not making it up. I was asked that question
No, I'm
on the
sure.
street this morning. So it does come up a lot.
It's a really hard thing to understand the concept of how much volume an acre foot takes up. We have customers are coming to take rain barrels, and 2 or 3. And how many rain barrels would it take for an acre foot of water? It starts to give you an idea. A rain barrel is what, 50 gallons. An acre foot is 325,850 gallons. So a lot of rain barrels.
6,000.
Yeah, a lot of rain barrels in there. So dredging sounds good, but when you get into the numbers, it doesn't pan out. So we've narrowed the storage down to 3 options, and the team's working through, different design options, looking at an upstream design of Kent Reservoir, upstream expansion of that dam rather than the downstream expansion that they had initially considered, looking at Upper Nicasio. Bottom line is, this type of reservoir project, it's a 10+ year project in terms of duration, but it could provide somewhere in the region of 20,000 acre feet of additional storage for the district.
If you can get it permitted.
A lot of ifs along the way. And so this is sort of the summary of the top 3, basically Sewell-Hooley, Upper Nicasio, and Kent, and they're all in order of sort of technical feasibility from left to right. Sewell-Hooley presents the least technical challenges, and as we move across to the right, Kent has the most technical challenges.
Yeah, you deleted the cost column here. So
The cost on all of the options from conveyance as well is not in here. We'll be refining those and hopefully coming back to you. Some of them are going to go up, and maybe some of them will come down. And the next slide kind of
just a recall. Sewell-Hooley was 290 million.
290,
And the other ones were
600s.
over 600.
Yeah. So as the
Good
team,
news is that, like, we're not making the call right now. We're open and exploring, and nothing's off the table. So thank you, Paul, for letting us know that costs are going to go up and down. And so I am definitely not done doing this work. I appreciate the effort.
good points. So examples of work underway. Again, this team has been going out to looking at the different sites. And, you might think, well, what do you really get from a site visit? It just sounds like a consulting boondoggle. But it was really interesting. As they were driving around out there, they discovered some material that they went back and looked on the maps and found that there were some sandstone deposits. And what they'd found was like a little area of sort of shale looking material. And so they went back, looked at the geologic maps, and they were able to confirm that there are these borrow areas for sandstone. And what's significant about sandstone is it's different in terms of its strength than the material that was assumed in the earlier screening phase that we ended up with the short list from. And so that's allowed them to change the design of the dam from a different slope. So you've gone from a sort of a gentler slope to a more steep slope. It's less material, and so it should reduce construction costs and time. So looking at our kind of what's next, how are we going to bring this all together over the next few months? Of course, our short-term projects, it's just pedal to the metal, and we're moving as fast as we can on those to try to realize those water savings as quickly as we can. We want to come back to the board with the costs in the same way that we develop costs for desalination and recycled water and bring those. So you have that kind of apples to apples matrix. And we think we can do that probably in early August timeframe. In terms of discussing with the board a preferred alternative for conveyance, we think we'll be ready. Again, maybe it's late August, early September timeframe for those discussions with the board. And similarly with storage. And these are for those two sort of separate tracks to try to identify the preferred alternative there. And then bringing those together, how do we come up with a discussion on what's our final project going to look like? And we think we'll be ready to bring a good, healthy discussion for the board sometime in September, early October on that. And that concludes the presentation for this evening.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Lucy. We'll open it up for board discussion. Maybe we can start, Jed, with you.
Sure. Or behind the video audio. My only comment is that we've had a first and a second to discuss the contract negotiations with Sonoma, both the one that's coming up and potentially reviewing the master contract. And I did not see that here, although I saw a conveyance discussion coming up. So I'd like to make sure that as we look at all of our water supply options and the conveyance idea that was brought up at the end of the presentation, that we openly discuss our opportunities there.
Thank you, Jed. Larry?
No.
Matt?
Lucy and Paul, thank you very much for another great presentation. I do have a couple of questions, well, one question, I think, and then one comment. On all three conveyance projects, one of the phases is looks like a bifurcation off of a line from Suluhuli down to Nicasio. Could you help me understand the operational importance of that in light of that we're going to be looking to tie in Suluhuli to Nicasio as a separate effort?
Yeah, it's a good question. The thought is that in order to get the water to Suluhuli, you already have to achieve an elevation that would allow you to get it into Nicasio. So it's shown as an option for us. We're including it in the project description if we were to move forward with one of these projects from a CEQA perspective, so that we could build it at a future date. It doesn't mean that we would have to. So I think there is some further work for us to evaluate the benefit to us from building a pipeline like that.
Gotcha. No, I definitely appreciate all the different options and looking at them as phases, because it's very helpful because it allows me to look at the project without so much of a sticker shock that we've seen on the other ones. So thank you. And then not to dwell on the cost, because I know it's not part of this equation, but when we do look at them, get presented to them, specifically around local storage in Suluhuli, it's going to be really important to, and I know we can't future cast too much, but really important to find out exactly how much it's going to cost to purchase that land. And then including any infrastructure improvements and changes and things like that. So we have a true cost of what that project's going to be as well.
It's a good point. We are working on exactly that.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Paul, I have just really almost a silly question on slide 13. Our longer term projects, you have estimates of between 5,000 acre feet a year to 12,000 acre feet a year. And that doesn't really align with what we're looking at for storage. So just so that I can be fully understanding when I have to explain this to our stakeholders.
Right. So it's a bit of a dance between capacity, where we talk about storage as 20,000 acre feet, recognizing that that's, if we assume a 4-year drought, just round numbers, not accounting for evaporation, not accounting for stream flows and environmental releases, that's about a 5,000 acre foot a year yield. And of course, we'll get sharper with our pencils as we get closer on those.
Right.
And similarly with conveyance, you saw that could range anywhere from, 4 to, depending on the number of months that we have to pump, maybe we can get as much as 8,000 acre feet out of it. So there's an a dry year yield of somewhere between 5,000 and I think 12,000 is about the right number in terms of dry year yield for us, depending on the projects that we choose to move forward with.
Right. So yeah, maybe we can, it's helpful to differentiate between total potential yield versus dry year yields. Just, yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thanks for that explanation. I just want to, I think we make the same point, Lucy, every time you give a water supply update, and I'll do it again, which is that on slide 8, you show this every time, that no matter how good our rainy season is, it only takes one following bad rainy season to trigger our drought contingency measures. And this is obviously why progress with our water supply roadmap is so important. So thanks so much. Thanks for this encouraging update. Terry, we'll open it up to public comments, please.
Yes, we have at least 5. Mr. Phil Sauter, then Larry Minikis.
Lucy, and spoke to the comment.
Turn the mic on, Phil. Turn the mic on.
Oh, sorry. In her presentation, Lucy spoke to the comments that I had, so thank you very much for that.
Yeah, this is kind of a keystone moment. I think it should be called out, even though it's really hot and our brains are kind of shut down at this point. But this is really important, and we are moving forward. And the criticism that you're not moving fast enough, it kind of shows here the steps you have to take. You can't just lay a pipeline. You're going to have to maybe purchase land or get easements or look at biological, cultural, all the resources. You're going to have to look at which direction you're going to have to go. So you can't just say, okay, we're going to build a pipeline from here to there. Let's go. Boom. And I think this shows that it has to be step by step by step. And we're moving in a good direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next 3 speakers are Carol Dulcini, Ed Jameson, and Maria G. Go ahead, Carol.
Thank you. Good evening, directors, staff, and good people of Marin. I have concerns tonight about one short-term plan and one long-term plan in the water supply roadmap. Regarding short-term plans, the plan to electrify the pump station at Sulihuli Reservoir has been paused. I saw that in the last meeting. I hope that this project is restarted soon. Electrifying the pump station is a good and feasible project. It gives MMWD access to 10,000 acre-feet of water that have been very rarely accessed up to now. It does not inundate and destroy neighboring communities. It does not harm the environment, and it is not too costly. Now, regarding long-term plans, studies are ongoing to raise the Sulihuli Dam by 39 feet and increase the reservoir by 20,000 acre-feet. This is not a good solution to Marin's water supply issues. I hope this project is stopped soon. It is too costly. The initial price tag for construction costs alone is, as was mentioned, $290 million, and this number is unrealistically low. Increasing the size of the reservoir by 20,000 acre-feet will inundate and destroy bordering communities and businesses. It is bad for the environment. This project, as proposed, will inundate and destroy acres upon acres of rich and biodiverse riparian habitat, which contain listed species. Right now, in order to mitigate the damage to the people and the environment surrounding it, MMWD staff and consultants are studying ways to, quote, right-size, unquote, the Sulihuli Reservoir. Maybe 20,000 acre-feet is not the right volume for that site. Maybe it should be less. When Sulihuli was built in response to the drought of '76, the directors at the time figured out that they could construct a dam to create a 10,000 acre-foot reservoir without causing undue harm. In other words, the Sulihuli Reservoir is already the right size right now. So electrify the pump, gain easy access to 10,000 acre-feet of water, leave Sulihuli at its present right size. No need to increase this reservoir at such cost to the neighborhood, to the environment, and to Marin water ratepayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ed Jameson, please.
Yes, this was another outstanding presentation by Mr. Sellier on the complex supply alternatives. Since moving forward a year ago, the cost of the Phoenix Lake project has doubled from $5 million to $10 million, and the previously trivial potential water savings have now apparently been further reduced to protect the fish. $10 million is not an insignificant amount, given our inadequate bonding capacity to address drought supply inadequacy. It would have to be paid for out of rate increases. The board needs to be presented with an updated cost per acre foot for this project before it moves forward. My guess is that it just does not make sense. As for the Sonoma water conveyance alternatives, 5,000 acre feet per year is at most only about a third or likely less of what we need for drought security. And in a 4-year drought, a 20,000 acre foot of increase in storage would only be about 4,000 acre feet per year net of evaporation, not 5,000 acre feet a year. In their final draft, Jacobs corrected this in 1 or 2 places, but missed the correction in other places. The correct number is about 4,000 acre feet per year in a 4-year drought for a 20,000 acre foot increase in storage capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Maria G, please.
To add on to Carol's comments, and thank you for hearing me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. In 1876, at the age of 23 years, my great-grandfather Constantino Barboni left San Antonio, Switzerland. Like most wide-eyed travelers of that time, he hit the ground running to establish his dreams. The story is long, inspiring, and hard-fought, but ultimately he rooted in Hicks Valley. So did many of the families that still reside here. We are a part of the dwindling ranchers and farmers of Marin County. As we have said many times, should the expansion of the Sula Hula be implemented, MMWD will destroy our homes, our barns, infrastructure, roads, businesses, our everything. It will destroy our families from a future in Marin County agriculture and from any continued hard-fought dedication to this ever-fading way of life. In 1979, you took a piece of us. Now you want us all. You want it all. The cost to your consumers is astronomical, and the cost to our community is devastating. It's another nail in the coffin to Marin County agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Next 3 speakers are Jack, then Elaine Delsini, and Marilyn Price. Go ahead, Jack.
I noticed that the actual cost of expanding our Russian River water use was never fully calculated, other than the $1,800 cost directly for the water. And just thought that that should be compared to the cost of raising alpine, for example.
Thank you. Elaine, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Recent reports from the consultants at the board meeting last month have resulted in an increased focus on augmenting the Sula Hula Reservoir. Although it may pencil out in the setting of an office, or perhaps just looking at the construction of the dam itself, the reality is as follows. The proposed reservoir would be extremely shallow. I just took a tour out there through the Barboni properties, not just Delsini properties, but it would be extremely shallow, which would mean greater heat and algae blooms. The reservoir, as it is, has been studied for the inversion of heat layers, and you already know that it sets up a perfect setting for the uptake of methylmercury into the food chain, not to mention toxicities from archaeobacteria, also known as blue-green algae. The raising of the Sula Hula will very quickly inundate homes, barns, outbuildings, as has been said before, corrals, roads, all of which would need to be mitigated. And I have heard a suggestion at some point that perhaps we could do a shoulder dam, building a shoulder dam, but that would increase the cost even more, and it would decrease the needed acre feet. Sula Hula's remoteness and geography poses problems as well. Let's see, it costs money to pump the water from such a distance, and it's also slow to fill. I know it said on the graph today that it was reliable, but Sula Hula is very slow to fill comparatively. It doesn't fill on its own in low water years, and it's a high-risk move to expect it to perform as the sole water storage solution for the 30K acre feet that the district seeks. I suggest not augmenting the Suli Reservoir. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Marilyn Price, please.
Yes, well, I want to compliment you all for continuing to protect all of our Marin residents with sufficient water, and definitely it's something we need. I don't want to introduce politics to this conversation, but I was listening to a noted historian today who was concerned about the political times we are in. And what she was appealing to was to the community, to we, the people. And I just so firmly believed, I love what Phil Sauter said at the very beginning of this meeting about doing more study of conservation. I just very firmly believe if we involve we, the people, the community, in knowing what the whole water issue is, that we could get a different response from them. There's so much more ways that people can save if they're engaged and really understand the problem. And I would trust that we could get the people of Marin to do much more. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks a lot, Paul. Lucy, I think this was just an information item. Okay, so we'll move to agenda item 9B, which is an amendment to our miscellaneous agreement with Woodard and Curran for water supply roadmap program management and support services. I'll send Monty a text.
Would you like me to wait
No.
after this?
Yeah, after this item, he's recusing himself from item 9, the complete item A and B.
Got it. Thanks, Jared.
Okay, thank you again, Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director with this item. This is an amendment number 2 with an agreement with Woodard and Curran to allow them to continue to support the roadmap projects. Woodard and Curran are well qualified in this regard. They have, of course, direct experience with the district, having worked on the emergency intertie project, bringing that project to a successful design conclusion in a very short period of time. And the projects that we're engaged in are similarly complex, pipelines to convey winter water to storage, and of course, increasing local storage, both of which Woodard and Curran's staff are experienced with. So staff are recommending that the board approve the request to authorize amendment number 2 with Woodard and Curran in the amount stated in the staff report. Is around $469,000 for their continued support over the next year.
Thank you, Paul. Start with directors' comments. Matt?
Fully support this and just want to highlight all the new options they're providing through this process. So it's been really good to see, and it's been really reassuring that they're taking a deep look, specifically all these new things that you're bringing up. So appreciate the dive into this. Thank you.
Larry?
I'm cool.
Jed, any comments on the Woodard?
Yeah, do you have any like outside limit on this? Is this going to keep getting renewed? What's our time frame? Yeah, it's hard for me to have context.
It's a good question, Director Smith. I think I'm just waiting for a motorbike to go by. So I think my response is that as we work through this next phase of, and we get into a preferred project alternative, we're going to need continued resources to make sure that the consulting teams that we're hiring are able to be both supported by staff, and staff in turn will need the support of experts like Woodard and Curran in some of these areas. So I do see this resource being needed going forward, though I don't know that it necessarily needs to be Woodard and Curran continuously. It may be that there are other consulting firms that would also qualify to provide this support. I think then over the next year, based on the familiarity that Woodard and Curran have with the system and the tasks that we have in front of us, they are the right choice for us to continue over the next year.
I just think it's always good with items like this, and even though it's quote unquote only $400,000, I think it's important for us to have very clear milestones, what we want to achieve, metrics for success, and then how we move on with these guys or not for the next phase of the project. So that would be helpful.
Thanks, Jed. And maybe for additional context, I note that with this amendment, all our total to date with them would go up to about $914,210.
That's correct. Over the about 2-year period.
2-year period. Any other thoughts or feedback?
To that end, please include the total when you up the contract by 469. Please put in what that brings the contract to.
It is in the staff report.
Okay, I was just looking. I didn't see
It's
it.
the last, under the financial analysis, I think it's the last paragraph there.
Okay.
Terry, do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, we have a couple. Mr. Phil Sauter and Ed Jamison.
Thank you for the presentation. It's been very rewarding over the past couple of years to hear the board and staff acknowledge their commitment to conservation as an important and immediate water supply option. But actual programs, projects, and funding have often been slow to follow. I looked through the scope of work to see how conservation would be integrated, but conservation wasn't even mentioned in the scope of work. I did a brief search of Woodard and Curran's website to see what expertise they brought to the conservation component of water supply. I didn't see any mention of conservation expertise or of employees who have any experience in that area. I'd like to suggest that approval of this contract extension be postponed until we have either a revision to the scope of work that includes conservation as an element of water supply, or until we have a companion consulting contract with another firm with expertise in conservation. I am sensitive to an earlier speaker's concern about the overuse of consultants. I personally don't have a problem with spending money for that expertise, although I do often find staff skills and knowledge and abilities are so strong that I think of consultants as more the wind beneath their wings as something necessary to happen. But I'm certainly not going to begrudge if they feel the need for that help. I'll support that. I think an area where we may need some help, we've talked about passive conservation versus active conservation, and I think we're moving into the active conservation mode, especially as we seek to extend and support Northern European landscapes like green lawns in an increasingly Mediterranean climate. I think any water district would have a challenge with that these days. And I'd like to see any future consulting arrangements we have include that support for new tricks, new ways, more efficient ways, getting to build our own internal expertise in conservation so we can be more active. I'd like to see that part of this decision tonight. Yeah, that's it. I'd like to see that included in the board's consideration tonight.
Thank you. Ed Jamison, then Larry Minikis. Go ahead, Ed.
Yes, thanks. In 2021, we learned that our drought is Sonoma's drought, as they cut our allocation to only 4,000 acre feet for the next year, and then only 3,500 acre feet. I just hope that Woodward Curran will give us visibility to how much winter water is realistic to hope for during a 4-year drought. I'm skeptical. As for conservation, Badaus did a first-class job in November of 2022, and they had no meaningful suggestions for significant new programs. The consulting study was done, and we spent enough money on this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Larry Minikis.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this would fall under Woodward and Curran or not, but looking at possibly purchasing storage in Sonoma and becoming more of a partner there should be, well, part of this roadmap as well as we're looking at conveyance. And it may turn out to be the least expensive of our options and the most environmentally sound as well. I'm not advocating for that. I'm saying it could turn out that way. I want to be very clear. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Thanks, Terry. Paul, if you could just give an update on the development of the water efficiency master plan, which has been underway some time in collaboration with EKI Water and Research, just to, maybe reassure that, there is a committed parallel effort to ensure that we stay on top of our, all of our conservation planning.
I'm not sure I could say it much better, but I think that was an apt summary. We have been working with EKI and the public over the past several months, even going as far as to host a public meeting with invitation to our public to attend and provide their ideas, and we've used some of their ideas in the master plan. We're hoping to bring the master plan to the board at an upcoming meeting for sort of accepting the plan. It's not really an adoption of the plan, it's just sort of receiving the master plan. The master plan has a number of attributes to it that go through both incentives targeting everything from turf to rain barrel incentives, education programs. It's really a world-class leading water efficiency program. In fact, has won awards not too long ago, a couple of awards this year. And I think that, as Jameson pointed out, Madaus were invited to critique the plan early on. And since Madaus have had a look at it, we have adapted it and changed it and added public outreach and pilot programs to it. So I feel comfortable that the Water Efficiency Master Plan really is an outstanding approach to water conservation for this district.
Paul, if I could just to add a little bit, I did have the opportunity today to review the early preliminary draft of what we'll be bringing to the board at the next board meeting, looking for acceptance of the master plan. And I was impressed as understating when you see the body of the activities, the new initiatives being proposed to move forward, from policy considerations to pilot programs to focusing on high water users. It really goes on and on. I do believe it's a world-class program, but I do look forward to the next board meeting when this is presented to the board and the community to kind of see and feel it all together. And hopefully the excitement and energy I felt reviewing the draft flows out from that presentation. So I am really looking forward to the next board meeting.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Paul. I think it was important to clarify that the current assignment with Woodard and Curran is not in any way diminishing our efforts around conservation. So with that, then I'll ask if we have a motion to approve amendment number 2 to our agreement with Woodard and Curran in the amount of $469,440 for water supply, roadmap, program management, and support services.
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Terry, if we could have a vote, please.
Yes, Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice President Sampson,
Yes.
and President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks again, Paul. We'll move to our next agenda item, which is future board and committee meetings and upcoming agenda items. This is a time when we ask board members to suggest future agenda items.
Shall I wait for?
Yeah, maybe we
Oh.
do a quick pause for Director Schmidt to rejoin.
Can you send a text?
I just did.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, Monty, you're back.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I jumped the gun a little, so I'll repeat that we're moving to our next agenda item, which is future board and committee meetings and upcoming agenda items. Also want to remind board members that, to make their request for future agenda items. Seeing none, Terry, maybe just.
I
Oh,
would,
sorry, Monty.
I'd like to make, yeah, I'd like to make a request for a future agenda item. In keeping with my comments at last Tuesday's board meeting regarding the Phoenix Bontempi project, there is a growing concern, I think, that's been raised about the impacts of the project and impacts on Ross Creek and critical habitat for coho and steelhead. To avoid unnecessary delays, I had requested a group of fisheries experts from Lagunitas Creek TAC to meet with an ad hoc meeting of the watershed committee to quickly develop a feasibility study plan to assess what kind of restoration actions might be needed to protect those species as part of the district's commitment toward stewardship and natural resources. That meeting hasn't been scheduled, and I think this is kind of unfortunate because I think it can lead to delays that are unnecessary. I'd like to request, though, that we convene an ad hoc meeting or a watershed committee meeting as soon as possible, to convene a group of folks that can work on developing a feasibility study plan that could be completed as part of the project. And I think that that's what would help address the concerns that have been raised, as well as move us forward as quickly as possible with this project. So I'd like to put that forward as a recommendation for either a subsequent board meeting, or whether that could be agendized as a watershed meeting.
Thanks, Monty. Ben, it feels like this was something that you actually commented on in your announcement. So maybe if you could come back to that.
Thank you, President Cush. I might not have been as clear as I could have been in my comments. The next step is what staff is doing is taking these comments from the meeting today and actually developing just that, a proposal that we would bring to the board accompanying the project MND, for the board to consider and potentially act on both at the same time at the next board meeting. And we're kind of working that way for a number of reasons. One, we do have, as you know, I believe, just very high-level expertise in-house with our fisheries staff. And in discussion with our Director of Watershed, Sean Horn, and his staff, they feel they really do have a good grasp on the comments and concerns that were expressed, and feel like the proposal that we would bring the board at the next board meeting would hit the mark in terms of an appropriate next step to understand kind of the lay of the land in terms of the creek, the opportunities on stewardship activities. But what has been impressed upon me is this foundational work, regardless of where folks want it to go, is the necessary and really only kind of foundational step to move forward. And I do think it would be a significant move from the district were the board to support that approach. We've, in the history of the district, never looked at Cordemadera Creek, Ross Creek in the way that we're going to propose in terms of gathering data and developing understanding of the nature of the habitat and the stewardship opportunity. So I do appreciate the interest. I do feel at this point, in my view, it's not needed. I do look forward, certainly, as that effort would get underway, to have a very open process and invite whoever is interested to attend as we get into it. And I have to believe, the district efforts could continue in some way subsequent to that, where, other stakeholders that may be interested would be engaged at that time. That's my thoughts on that.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Any other comments or questions?
I'd like to just follow up if I could, because I think we do have an opportunity here, but I want to make sure that opportunity doesn't stymie any progress we're making. And so I first want to thank you and district staff for the meetings this morning and gathering all that and looking forward to moving it. I do think we have an opportunity to look at potential impacts to the creek or potential opportunities to make progress in terms of restoration, but I think it should also be done in partnership and not just the district alone, because there's so many stakeholders in this, from basically from the dam all the way out to the bay. So it'd be a good partnership opportunity to see, and to your point, the word feasibility, to see what opportunities are there to make investments and how much that would cost and understand impacts. So we have a clear idea of what's going on, but I don't think they should be running. I mean, they can be run in parallel. I take that back. They can run in parallel, but I don't want them tied to each other. So I wouldn't support us taking them together as a vote in a package, because I think that the project needs to move forward in terms of the water supply efforts that we're doing for the district. But at the same time, it would be a shame if we miss the opportunity to take a look at that area and to see where potentially we could make some gains on that. So.
I think that that it's the conversations that have happened thus far are helpful. I think that my understanding is that those conversations have happened with just a few of, I think, maybe the greater number of interests that are now aware of this issue. So I think that in general, my sense is that it's better to be inclusive.
If I may, really quickly, just because we're kind of going off tangent from the agenda item here. This is really just, what we want to see on the agenda at a future meeting. If that's recommended, of course, pursuant to the board handbook, a first and second, we can do that. But I do just want to be mindful of that for members of the public who, are not here on this item tonight.
Debating it. Yeah, a couple items. Ben, maybe think about how we respond to firsts and seconds that are brought by the board. I think there were two that I brought up at the last meeting that have occurred over the last year that we have not had follow-up with, and one that I brought up today. So maybe, I know you've talked with me about how carefully you track when the board here, according to our policies, has a first and a second. And given how carefully you track them, that respond, because we can't get
Sorry, you broke up, Director Smith. Director Smith, we couldn't hear you, sir.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, you were breaking up, but you were talking about first and second of the motion.
Ben, I think it would be good if you can report back when we have a first and a second from the board as a recommendation to follow up on an item, that you give us a sense of the timeline of when you'll be able to do that, so that they don't hang out for a long time. At the last board meeting, I think I brought up two of those first and seconds, one related to solar and another that we had brought up, and one that I brought up today. It'd be good for you to maybe keep track of those and let us know when you think the staff might be prepared to respond.
That's a good suggestion, and we will integrate that into our process, Director Smith.
Thank you.
So going back to I guess my motion, I just want to know where we stand on this. Is that I'm requesting that at our next board meeting, I guess, if it's not during a watershed ad hoc or a watershed meeting, that we are presenting on a detailed feasibility study plan. I'm assuming that that's maybe, Ben, that's what you're talking about, but that incorporates comments from other experts, the Lagunitas TAC being, the most logical group because of their knowledge and interest in the watershed. So I guess I'm trying to understand whether that motion is carrying forward or not.
I can follow up on that. I think that for me, the timing is not as critical, because we do have the opportunity to get the right folks in the room. And I know that a lot of work goes into the putting together a presentation for the next meeting. And 2 weeks from today is going to be here before we know it, unfortunately. And I'd rather get this right with the right folks and really concentrate on the people that are taking a look at or who have a vested interest in this. And I think we identified a couple of those today. So it sounds like a lot of the comments are there, but I support getting a presentation. I'm just not as critical as the time on that.
So I'm want to ensure I understand, because I am operating under the board direction to hold the stakeholder meeting that we held and bring back in short order, specifically at the next board meeting, the project. So were you suggesting, Director Sampson, that we delay bringing the project back to the next board meeting, or separate these items and bring the plan back to a subsequent meeting?
Yeah, I would be comfortable with that. I think that they should be separated out, and we should be looking at deciding whether to move forward on the Bontempi to Phoenix transmission line as a separate item, and then look to get the presentation or the feasibility plan in terms of opportunities to enhance or restore the creek at a following meeting.
So just to clarify, Matt, you're saying that for the next board meeting, we should attempt to move forward with the Phoenix to Bontempi connection, and then, if necessary, hold off on the discussion of the feasibility study until there has been the additional input that Monty's seeking.
And I think I'd like to see that project, the Bontempi transmission, moved at the same, on the next board meeting if possible, if that's still possible for staff to be able to bring that forward.
Yes, that would be, based on the last discussion we had when it was brought. The sense I had and why we were operating in this direction is that there may have been some board members that felt moving forward with the project in conjunction with the plan was their preferred approach, because it just demonstrates the commitment as we're moving forward with the project, the commitment to the study. So certainly I can go either way, but I just wanted to point out that complexity potentially in just bringing the project.
And just one
I just want to, I'd like to just be clear that my proposal is that there is a presentation about that is based on input from other stakeholders, not just I think the two that have been engaged with so far, but I think that engagement and conversation is important to have in before making decisions about the project. That is my proposal. That may not carry, but I just want to be clear about what my recommendation is.
Yeah, I thank you for I think spelling that out really clearly, Monty. I think from my perspective, it would be difficult to pause on a decision regarding the project until we have, all of the stakeholder inputs on a creek restoration program that are necessary or advisable. So my preference would be that we decouple these activities if that is necessary to get the additional inputs. I think hearing no other comments, Monty, it doesn't look like this motion is going to move forward.
At my respect to the other board members' decisions, about what to carry forward, I do think that these two things inform each other, and to make decisions without being informed about related potential impacts of the project, as has been outlined in letters that have been sent to the board, I think is moving forward without really considering the things that have been raised by members of our community. And so I think it's prudent and responsible to understand those concerns and address them before moving forward. And that's the basis of my recommendation.
Yeah, I guess certainly I don't want to diminish what you're saying, but honestly, Monty, I really did think that Ben had outlined a path forward so that we would be able to consider both of these issues simultaneously maybe not with the extent of input that you would like, but certainly from our own in-house experts. I also think Ben made a good point that some of the broader discussions might be more productive if we have further thinking, analysis, and data from our own in-house experts to make that a more productive discussion. So I think those could be sequenced well without diminishing sort of the commitment to the end goal.
No, and I just want to follow up by saying we do have a really good opportunity here to understand potentially doing good work to improve Ross and Corvadera Creek. I don't want to take away from that. I think we have the opportunity to do that. We've already started the process. We've gotten stakeholders going, and we can look at that process separately. But delaying this project any longer could push it back. I'm assuming a calendar or 12 months or so. And at that point, guess
Yeah, I think per Jared's comments, this isn't the time to debate it. I think the motion's been put forward, and we'll have the discussion when the item comes up for approval. And if there are reasons to approve it or not approve it at that time, we can make the call.
Really quickly. Yes, I agree with that comment from Director Smith. I also want to note is, as an agenda item for that project moves forward, a full CEQA analysis has been performed. So it's not that project's moving forward without any environmental review or analysis. So I just want to make that really clear for the record. And then I believe at this point the motion's failed. So, I think it's probably in the best interest after General Manager Hornstein makes his comment to review the future meeting items and then move forward tonight.
So I just wanted to share that my plan based on the comments that I've heard and direction from the board that was a bit mixed, understandably, with this complex issue would be to bring both items to the next meeting as separate items, which would provide the board the opportunity to look at what staff is proposing for the study and perhaps the robustness of it and what's spelled out assuages some concerns that may be out there, and the board may select to move that forward or may direct staff to go back and get further stakeholder input. So that's my current thought on moving forward, my current plan.
I think that sounds good, Ben. Okay, and with that, Terry, other meetings and
yes,
coming up.
just quickly, on July 16th is our next regular board meeting, where we'll have a public hearing on a water efficiency ordinance. July 19th is our operations committee meeting. We'll have a discussion and update on the micro turbines and pumpbacks. August 6th is the next board of directors meeting. One of the discussions is a grant update. The next external meeting is the North Bay Watershed Association board meeting, and that's on the 12th of this month at 9:30. And we do have a public comment on this item. So if I may.
Thank you, Terry.
Okay. Mr. Ed Jamison, please. Go ahead, sir.
Yes, thanks. It seems pretty clear that the Phoenix project cannot move forward until the stakeholder inputs are in place. These inputs may well negatively affect the projected water savings and further increase the acre-foot costs. Rushing is less desirable than getting the projects and its costs right. We should not move forward before these issues are resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
That will adjourn the Marin Water Board of Directors meeting of July 2nd, 2024. Happy 4th of July, everyone.
Have a good evening.